The pirate captain survived storms, naval battles, and years beneath the black flag, only to watch every man who had sworn loyalty to him die one by one before his own execution, proving that the British Empire had discovered a punishment more terrifying than death itself, forcing a captain to witness the destruction of his entire crew before finally tightening the noose around his own neck. Picture the year 1722. Stand beside the crowded execution dock before sunrise and breathe the damp air rolling inland from the harbor, carrying the smell of rotting oak planks soaked in centuries of salt water, pine tar melting beneath the first warmth of dawn, wet hemp rope, stale gunpowder lingering from ceremonial cannon salutes, and the sour odor of thousands of anxious spectators pressed shoulder to shoulder along the riverbank. Every creak of a mast echoed across the water while gulls circled overhead, screaming as though anticipating another feast. Upon a weather-beaten sloop, its tumble home narrowing the upper hull above massive futtocks fastened with hand-forged iron bolts, stood a pirate captain whose fate would become one of the cruelest psychological punishments of the Golden Age of Piracy. Rather than hanging him immediately, the authorities devised a spectacle intended to shatter every fragment of hope still remaining within him. His crew would die first, one after another, while he remained chained to the deck beneath heavy naval guard. Throughout the late 17th and early 18th centuries, pirate executions served purposes far beyond justice. They functioned as carefully engineered demonstrations of state authority designed to restore confidence in maritime commerce after decades of raids that disrupted Atlantic trade routes stretching from Jamaica to London. Merchant convoys transporting sugar, indigo, tobacco, cacao, dyewood, and silver represented fortunes measured in tens of thousands of pounds sterling, while every captured vessel threatened insurance markets and imperial taxation. Governments therefore transformed executions into calculated political theater, ensuring every sailor entering port witnessed the consequences awaiting those who rejected royal authority and sailed beneath the black flag. The condemned captain had once commanded a brigantine measuring nearly 90 feet along the gun deck, with a burden approaching 150 tons, carrying 12 iron 6-pounder cannons secured behind reinforced oak gun ports. Each cannon rested upon elm carriages reinforced with iron straps, firing round shot cast from dense gray iron molds, weighing approximately 6 pounds each. Black powder charges consisted primarily of 75% potassium nitrate, 15% charcoal produced from willow, and 10% sulfur refined into coarse grains that balanced rapid ignition with controlled pressure inside the barrel. When touched by the glowing match, combustion expanded violently into superheated gases, forcing the projectile through the bronze or iron bore before smashing enemy hull planking apart. Oak fibers shattered longitudinally while interior splinters exploded inward like thousands of wooden blades, often killing more sailors through fragmentation than through the cannonball itself. Such technical mastery had once made the captain feared across the Caribbean, where careful navigation, disciplined gunnery, and detailed articles of agreement maintained order aboard his vessel. Yet none of those victories mattered now. Shackled wrists rubbed raw against forged iron restraints, while Royal Navy Marines surrounded him with loaded muskets fitted with triangular socket bayonets. Escape had become physically impossible, but psychological suffering had only begun. Before the executions commenced, officials deliberately marched each captured pirate across the dock in full public view. Their wrists remained bound behind their backs, with thick hemp cord, roughly 1 inch in diameter, while their ankles shuffled awkwardly across weathered timbers, polished smooth by generations of dock workers. The hangman's rope itself represented a carefully manufactured instrument, rather than a simple length of cord. Constructed from tightly twisted hemp fibers, soaked repeatedly in hot tar before drying beneath tension. Each noose resisted stretching during the sudden shock of suspension. The execution platform overlooked hundreds of anchored merchant vessels displaying English, Dutch, Portuguese, and French colors, reminding every observer that international commerce depended upon predictable law rather than maritime violence. One by one, the captain recognized familiar faces. The quartermaster who once calculated shares according to carefully negotiated articles of agreement. The gunner whose knowledge of elevation and powder charges repeatedly saved the ship during engagements. The carpenter who repaired fractured futtocks after storms threatened to tear apart the hull. Every man paused briefly beneath the gallows, exchanging silent glances with the captain before the cart rolled away. Boots kicked desperately against empty air as neck muscles strained beneath tightening hemp. Some died quickly from fractured cervical vertebrae, while others slowly suffocated, their bodies twisting in agonizing rhythm with every gust crossing the harbor. Authorities intentionally delayed the captain's own execution until sunset, forcing him to witness hours of unbearable grief. Naval officers understood that fear spread farther through memory than through death alone. Throughout the 18th century, governments increasingly recognized the value of psychological deterrence. Public punishment communicated imperial power more effectively than written proclamations, especially among largely illiterate maritime populations. During intervals between executions, priests recited prayers while clerks recorded official proceedings with remarkable precision, noting dates, weather conditions, names of witnesses, confiscated property, and inventories of captured weapons. Nearby stood barrels containing seized cutlasses with blades measuring nearly 30 inches, boarding axes polished smooth by repeated use, and flintlock pistols whose hardened steel frizens produced showers of sparks against carefully shaped flints. Even these weapons illustrated the technological sophistication of pirate crews, often dismissed as mere criminals. Many captains possessed advanced knowledge of celestial navigation, careening procedures used to scrape marine growth from hulls, prevailing trade winds, hull construction, and logistics required to maintain crews across enormous oceanic distances. Yet every practical skill collapsed before the relentless machinery of imperial justice. As each body swung gently above the tide, silence gradually replaced earlier shouting, until only the creaking of rope and distant waves remained. By late afternoon, the harbor had transformed into a floating classroom of terror. Apprentices barely entering maritime life stared upward with pale faces, while veteran captains deliberately ordered their crews to observe every detail. The message proved unmistakable. A pirate might accumulate gold, seize richly laden prizes, or briefly command fear across the Atlantic, but the state possessed greater endurance than any outlaw fleet. Royal officials frequently displayed executed bodies for days or even weeks, allowing wind, rain, seabirds, insects, and changing tides to reduce recognizable human forms into skeletal warnings visible from approaching channels. Some notorious pirates were later enclosed within iron gibbets, suspended from towering wooden posts overlooking heavily trafficked waterways. Exposure to constant moisture accelerated corrosion despite protective coatings of tar, while salt crystals accumulated across iron surfaces through repeated evaporation. Travelers arriving after weeks at sea often encountered these grim monuments before spotting city churches or warehouses. For the captive captain, however, the deepest wound remained invisible. Every swinging body represented shared storms survived, desperate battles won, rationed meals consumed during long crossings, and promises exchanged beneath the Articles of Agreement, binding free companions together. Those memories weighed far heavier than iron chains. Only after darkness settled across the river did guards finally escort the captain toward the waiting gallows. Witnesses later remarked that he walked steadily, not because hope remained, but because nothing capable of frightening him still existed. The punishment had achieved its intended purpose. Hours earlier, his world had already ended as each companion disappeared into silence beneath the tightening noose. Contemporary observers often described pirate executions as swift conclusions to violent careers, yet reality proved considerably more deliberate. Imperial governments understood that authority depended not merely upon defeating enemies at sea, but upon shaping public memory on land. Every carefully measured rope, every recorded sentence, every guarded procession, every visible corpse contributed to an enormous campaign protecting maritime trade, worth millions across the Atlantic world. Letters of marque authorized private violence in wartime, while piracy rejected every legal boundary separating sanctioned force from criminal predation. The captain, who had once navigated reefs, storms, and naval patrols with remarkable skill, ultimately discovered an enemy impossible to outmaneuver. A government determined to transform justice into unforgettable spectacle. As the trap opened beneath his feet, the final sound carried across the sleeping harbor was not cheering nor prayer, but the slow groan of stretched hemp tightening under human weight, echoing among silent masts long after every lantern along the waterfront had burned low.